Welcome everyone to my channel. I'm really excited you're here. Today we're going to dive into a special theme together and I can't wait to share this experience with you. So let's get started and remember to subscribe so you never miss an episode. In the summer of 1776, the city of Philadelphia hummed with heat, horse carts, and rumor. Flies gathered at the windows of the brick buildings, and the air smelled of ink, sweat, and river mud from the nearby Delaware River. Inside a modest hall on Chestnut Street, men argued about words that would change the world. At the Independence Hall, shutters were drawn tight despite the stifling weather. The delegates feared spies, they feared hesitation even more. Among them sat Thomas Jefferson, tall and thoughtful, his mind alive with phrases about equality and rights. Near him John Adams paced restlessly, tapping a rolled parchment against his palm. And at the front, dignified and steady, was George Washington, who would soon lead a fragile army against the might of an empire. The arguments were fierce. Could 13 scattered colonies truly stand alone? Would farmers and merchants trade the safety of the British crown for an uncertain experiment? Outside, ordinary people waited for news. Sailors leaned against tavern doors. Women sewed uniforms by candlelight. Enslaved Africans listened carefully, wondering whether the bold words about liberty might one day reach them too. When the United States Declaration of Independence was finally approved, the bell in the tower rang and crowds surged into the streets. Cheers echoed off the cobblestones. Yet beneath the celebration lay the heavy knowledge that freedom would demand sacrifice. War followed swiftly. Through brutal winters and uncertain summers, Washington's soldiers marched with bleeding feet. And at Valley Forge, hunger and cold nearly broke them. Snow covered the huts, smoke drifted into the gray sky. Still they endured. Across the ocean, allies in France watched carefully, and eventually their ships and soldiers tipped the balance. When victory came at Yorktown, it felt less like a triumphant shout and more like a long exhale. Peace did not solve everything. The new nation struggled under weak leadership and empty coffers. In 1787, delegates returned to Philadelphia to draft a stronger plan of government. The United States Constitution emerged from heated compromise. It created a delicate system of checks and balances, three branches meant to guard against tyranny. Yet even as it promised liberty, it allowed slavery to continue, planting a contradiction at the heart of the Republic. The young country grew quickly. And settlers pushed westward across the Appalachian Mountains into lands already home to native nations. Treaties were signed and broken. Steamboats churned along the Mississippi River, carrying cotton, timber, and people free and enslaved toward expanding markets. In 1803, the vast Louisiana Territory doubled the nation's size, opening opportunity and conflict in equal measure. As decades passed, arguments over slavery sharpened. Abolitionists spoke passionately in churches and newspapers. Enslaved people resisted in quiet and courageous ways. The nation's moral divide could not be contained by compromise forever. In 1861, war erupted between North and South. Fields that once grew corn and tobacco became battlefields. At Gettysburg, cannon fire thundered for 3 days, leaving thousands fallen beneath the summer sun. Later that year, President Abraham Lincoln stood before a cemetery there and spoke of a new birth of freedom. His words were brief but powerful, reminding Americans that democracy required dedication and sacrifice. The Civil War ended in 1865 and slavery was abolished. Yet freedom did not bring equality overnight. Reconstruction promised change, but prejudice and violence undermined progress. Still, African American communities built schools, churches, and businesses determined to claim their rights as citizens. Meanwhile, factories rose in northern cities. Railroads stitched the continent together, linking the Atlantic to the Pacific. Immigrants arrived from Europe and Asia, stepping onto crowded docks with hope and fear in their eyes. They labored in steel mills, garment factories, and on the tracks that crossed vast plains. America's cities swelled with languages, music, and ambition. At the turn of the 20th century, the nation stepped onto the world stage. Soldiers sailed across oceans during World War I in the 1920s. Jazz spilled from Harlem clubs, and skyscrapers climbed higher into the skyline. But prosperity faltered in 1929 when the stock market crashed, plunging the country into the Great Depression. Bread lines stretched along city blocks. Dust storms swept across the Great Plains, darkening skies at midday. Leadership again proved crucial. President Franklin D. Roosevelt introduced sweeping programs to restore confidence and provide relief. Then, after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the United States entered World War II. Factories roared back to life, producing ships, planes, and tanks. Women took jobs in industries once closed to them. Soldiers fought across Europe and the Pacific, and when the war ended, the nation emerged as a global power. The decades that followed were marked by tension and transformation. During the Cold War, fear of nuclear conflict loomed large. At home, the civil rights movement demanded the nation live up to its founding ideals. In 1963, thousands gathered in Washington, D.C., where Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his dream of equality from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. Laws changed, though hearts and systems took longer. In 1969, millions watched as astronauts set foot on the moon, a triumph of science and imagination. The late 20th century brought both prosperity and challenge, economic shifts, technological revolutions, and debates about the nation's role in the world. Through every era, ordinary people shaped the story as much as presidents and generals. Farmers, factory workers, teachers, activists, and dreamers carried the nation forward. They argued, voted, protested, and rebuilt. They welcomed newcomers and struggled with division. They faced injustice and worked, sometimes slowly and imperfectly, toward greater inclusion. American history is not a straight line of triumph. It is a winding path marked by bold ideals and painful contradictions. The promise written in Philadelphia in 1776 of equality and unalienable rights has been tested again and again. Each generation has inherited both the achievements and the unfinished work of those before. Today, the same rivers still flow past old brick buildings. The bell in Independence Hall is silent, cracked, but preserved, a reminder that freedom can be fragile. The story of the United States continues to unfold, shaped by millions of voices. And somewhere, perhaps in a classroom or a town meeting, a young person is reading those old words and imagining what they might mean for the future.